This is not a Hamas war against Israel. This is not a Palestinian war against Israel. This is not an Arab war against Israel. This is an Iranian war against Israel through a number of surrogate terrorist organizations like Hamas, like the Houthis in Yemen, like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, like the Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria. All of these are part of the ring of fire strategy that Iran has been creating over the years.
The president has been talking about and will be talking in the State of the Union about American plans to construct a port in Gaza to get more humanitarian aid into that territory. What do you make of that? And I wonder, what do you believe the Biden administration should be doing about Gaza and the need for action there?
Well, we'll need to hear more about the specifics, but at least what's being leaked out before the actual address is that it won't involve American boots on the ground and they won't be there permanently. So building this port is going to be interesting. I guess their boots will just be in the water while they build it. The fact is, it's not that there are difficulties getting materials into Gaza. It's that there's uncertainty who's getting control of the materials when they get there. How much is Hamas stealing and taking into its underground tunnel network, and how much is actually getting to the Gazan residents? And I think that obstacle remains. It's hard to see how we build a port without boots on the ground. I mean, really, this is going to be interesting. But then the question is, so humanitarian goods come into the port. Does Hamas take control of them? Does the UN take control of
Yes.
them? It's a legitimate question.
Yeah, I mean the president has been keen, and no doubt still is keen, to get a deal in Gaza on exchanges of hostages and humanitarian aid and a ceasefire. But it still seems to be pretty stalled. Those talks still seem to be pretty much held up. What should America be doing now that it hasn't been doing, or is anything more possible?
Well, I think the quickest way to end this war is with an Israeli victory. Israel is acting in self-defense after the October 7 attack, and it has stated its objectives are the elimination of Hamas's military and political leadership. And that's what they're in the process of doing. So I think we should let them finish the job.
Mm.
If they don't, what we saw on October the 7th is simply going to come back sometime in the near future. That's
Yes.
number one. Number two, this is not a Hamas war against Israel. This is not a Palestinian war against Israel. This is not an Arab war against Israel. This is an Iranian war against Israel through a number of surrogate terrorist organizations like Hamas, like the Houthis in Yemen, like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, like the Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria. All of these are part of the ring of fire strategy that Iran has been creating over the years. And to treat Gaza as the conflict is in itself a mistake. And the administration simply will not point the finger of responsibility at Tehran, which is the epicenter of all this.
But it is argued when it comes to Gaza that a complete victory of the kind that Benjamin Netanyahu describes, the complete destruction of Hamas, is militarily not possible. And meanwhile, the humanitarian cost has become, well, beyond intolerable. Do you not accept any of those premises?
Well, let's take the second one first. Let's say the humanitarian situation is intolerable. Who's to blame? Hamas. Hamas started the war. Hamas is the entity which took what must be tens of millions of dollars of aid, and instead of pursuing economic development for the Gazan people, it built this incredible tunnel network. Uh, so if you hold Hamas responsible, then that is further basis for Israel to continue its self-defense action. Otherwise, you have a circumstance where a terrorist group commits the barbaric atrocities that Hamas did on October the 7th, and then because it commits the further barbaric atrocities of using its own people as human shields, it exercises a terrorist veto over Israel's right to self-defense. I think that's unacceptable.
All right, that is a clear answer. Meanwhile, Sweden has officially joined NATO. The earlier objections of Hungary having been, as it were, overcome. I'm sure you would welcome that, but there are now worries, aren't there, across NATO partners about the outcome of the U.S. election, and we've discussed this before. The threat to the well, America's involvement in NATO is on the minds of many leaders on this side of the Atlantic.
Right. Well, I'm delighted Sweden is joining NATO as I was last year when Finland joined officially. I just hope the United States is in NATO long enough to enjoy it. Uh, People should take very seriously Donald Trump's threat to withdrawal. I explained in my book what happened at the NATO summit in Brussels in 2018 when he came within an inch of withdrawing. Then he hasn't changed his mind, and I think he's going to try and get out. People say, "Well, that's simply not possible. People won't let him happen. Don't count on it."
Mm.
And if it's not taken seriously, I think there's every prospect that people will be even more surprised next year if Trump wins.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, Donald Trump will be the GOP runner, no surprise about that. But it does seem maybe a significant minority of Republicans supported Nikki Haley and harbour doubts about Donald Trump's fitness for office. I know you share many of those doubts, but do you believe that this is a potential obstacle to Donald Trump regaining office in the White House?
Well, I do. I mean, look. We've got two candidates who are going to be the nominees of the two major parties. Neither one of them is fit to be president of the United States for different reasons, but it's pretty sad commentary that we're going to have a rematch of 2020. I buy the analysis that in 2016, 2020, and now again in 2024, a very large group of people who don't like either candidate.
Mm.
And this year, it's the biggest of all three. And going back to the earlier ones, in 2016, it turned out of that group of people who don't like either candidate, more of them did not like Hillary Clinton, and therefore Trump got elected. Whereas in 2020, more of them didn't like Trump, and so Biden was elected. So the question is, in October, when absentee balloting begins in November, who will the electorate dislike more?
Yes.
And the other person will win.
Well, I know you are no fan of Joe Biden, Ambassador. So should those disaffected Republicans, should they hold their nose and vote for Joe Biden? Should they stay at home? How should they vote in order to deny Donald Trump the win that he wants?
Well, I don't, as I say, I don't think either one is fit to be president. I'm not going to vote for Biden. I did in 2020. He wasn't up to the job then in terms of mental competence. It hasn't gotten any better in the last 3.5 years. And by the way, it won't get any better over the next 4.5 years if he does get returned to office.
Yeah.
I wrote in the name of a conservative Republican on my ballot in Maryland in 2020, and I'll do the same this year because there's no conservative Republican on the ballot. The main thing I think Republicans should do is turn out whatever they vote at the top of the ticket, vote for Republican Senate and House candidates in
Yes.
state elective office so that at the federal level we can get control of the Senate, which is highly likely, and keep control of the House, which is more difficult but not impossible.
Yeah. Which would be for you the least worst option, President Joe Biden or President Donald Trump?
I think a meteor hitting the Earth would probably be the least worst option.
Oh, look, okay, there's a deadlock at the moment. I'm going to go back to Ukraine for a moment. There's deadlock in Congress over the release of those vitally important American funds for the Ukrainian war effort. Now, Republican lawmakers, we know, are blocking that payment. They're doing so at the urging of the former President Donald Trump. What is your take on that? Would it be possible to release those funds, and how should that be accomplished?
Well, let me just say first, I think this chaos in the House, which you correctly attribute to Donald Trump, is a forecast of what a Trump presidency will look like, of confusion, disorder, right across the board. A clear majority in the House favor aid to Ukraine and aid to Israel and aid to Taiwan and funds to increase security at the border. As was the case in the Senate when this bill passed overwhelmingly. All of the aid that we're talking about, at least all of the military aid to Ukraine, I think will be adopted. It may take another 30 days. We're going through our annual drill trying to get a budget that is actually moving successfully now. I think we'll continue, but I think we're going to have to get past that. That'll take a couple weeks. I think Speaker of the House Michael Johnson supports the aid to Ukraine. So it will get through. This is simply the sausage making out in public view, and it's never appealing, and it's not very appealing this time either. But I do think the aid will be approved.
Just a last word from you on the candidates, the two candidates. Now, we know very well that Joe Biden's age is seen as making him something of a liability, even among some of those on the Democratic side who want a Democrat in the White House. Donald Trump, too, has been seen to misspeak on a number of occasions. Do you, Ambassador, have any doubts about Donald Trump's mental acuity?
Well, I think his mental acuity is very strong on one point, and that is what's good for Donald Trump. He has an infinite attention span on that question. As to everything else that come within the responsibilities of being president of the United States, he has the attention span of a fruit fly. So that's a problem. It's not a question of mixing things up or competence as it is in the case of Biden. It's the absolute focus on the prism of how any given situation benefits Trump. Every politician takes politics into account. Donald Trump takes that exclusively into account when he makes his decisions.